And for some reason Twitch is not working. Why is that? Okay, so let's just double check. I've got the right key. Make sure that the right key is in the right place. Yeah, it's the same one. Okay, that looks better. Okay, that looks like it's actually going. Let's see whether or not that's working. Hello and welcome. I'm just trying to make sure that we're online. Yep, stream configuration quality excellent, that's good. We are live. Let's see. It'd be good to know if the audio is okay. So if you are watching along, then could you just please let me know whether or not the audio is working for you? That's always really, really helpful. Then I can figure out whether I need to change it or something similar. That would be great. Thanks very much. Okay, so this is the first stream I've done for a while. I've took a little break from streaming because I was too busy updating the Kickstarter, which is now running. Oh, just update that comment. Okay, all working now. Okay, so I spent a little bit of time, well, a lot of time working on getting the Kickstarter working. That took a long time to sort out. Unfortunately, we didn't make the Kickstarter, but we got a ton of exciting new stuff, which is cool. So apparently the audio is a bit low. Let me just see if I can tweak that. Let's see. I've got that full. If you could let me know whether that's any better, that'd be great. It's a new microphone, so I'm kind of still playing with it. So it would be good to know if that was any better. So, okay, moving on. So we've got a bunch of stuff to do today. I've got an hour's coding to do. That's what I'm planning on doing. And I'd like to crack straight on with that, really. So the plan is to completely overhaul the way that the entities work in the game. At the moment, the way that the entities work is like this. It's a very old-fashioned C++ way of doing it. I'm just going to demonstrate that now, and it's just not working. It works fine for what we were doing before. Let's see. Oh, still audio problems. I just love setting this stuff up. So I've got all my inputs on maximum. I've got that on maximum. I've got Cocoa Split on maximum. Damn microphones. So this is a microphone that works brilliantly as long as you're really close to it. I don't have anything else turned on, but I'll do my best. So let's go with that. This microphone is unfortunately very quiet, I've discovered. So I have a Samson C01U, and if anyone has any tips of how to improve that, then that would be great. Oh great, that's a little bit better. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, just move that in the right place. Okay, right, so this is the first of a weekly stream. I'm going to be spending a bit of time this week on screwing around with the entities to try and make them work better. At the moment, it's like I said, a very old-fashioned entity class with a bunch of physics object inheritance. Why don't we do that? It's got a bunch of physics code in it. There's a bunch of methods, virtual methods in it. Each of the entities, such as the ship, for example, let me just load that, is inherited from that. It also inherits from other places. There's just a lot of things not to like about this code. So the plan is I'm going to strip it right back. and build a new world which is entirely continuous. So at the moment we have these locations. Locations are even worse than the entities at the moment in the code. We've got a location class. It's a entirely consisting of abstract functions, which is a disaster. I mean, this code was originally written. I can't remember when it was written. Let's see. When did I originally write this? January 12th of 2012. So since then, I've learned a huge more about how games should work, and just lots and lots of things that I could improve on based on what we've got so far. So it's amazing. The amount you learn when you're writing games is incredible. So I have all of this stuff is just nightmarish because we've got a location abstract class which contains all of this, these abstract entities, and then we've got these template classes, which these are policies for how the physics and how the rendering should be done for a location. It sounds wonderful. I mean, some of you will be like, oh yeah, that sounds quite nice, and others of you will be thinking that's terribly slow. Well, the people who thought that was slow are right. It's not slow to write, but it's very slow to build, and it just causes lots and lots of problems. Like I can't have different compilation units for this code. I have to have it all in line, although that's not really an issue, but it's just hard to reason about, and it just means that for every type of location we get a whole new compiled class inside the compilation unit, which just bloats out the build and slows everything down. So this is going to go. We're not going to have locations anymore at all. The plan is to move that entirely into one huge big abstract map. So that's the plan. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to have a big map. It's going to contain pretty much the entire solar system in one big continuous map, so that if you wanted to, you could fly all the way through from Mercury through all the way to Pluto. That's the idea. And if we wanted multiple ones of those, we could do that, although at this point we're only simulating our current solar system. Okay. So if we start with this, what we need to do is actually comment out a ton of stuff. So if we head to our Unity build, if I can manage to do that. Okay, so this is where we're including all of the CPP files that actually the game consists of. So there's a whole ton of stuff in here that I'm just going to strip out for the moment while I have a think about how the entity system should work. And then we'll kind of build a new one on the inside, and then we'll bring stuff back in as we need it. But a lot of this stuff is necessarily going to change. The plan is I'm not going to screw around too much with the GUI. The GUIs can all stay. The history generator can all stay. The AI planning can all stay. I may or may not remove behavior trees. They become less relevant. But all of this entity code here, like bullets, the city, some of that stuff is all going to come out. Serialization will probably stay the same, but it'll be simplified. What else here? Yeah, much of this will stay the same, but the entities are not working. The particle buffer is reasonably well coded because I did that quite recently, so I'm going to keep that. Quad is definitely going, and as well as a number of these other utility things. And all of the ship code is extremely complex and really does need simplification. So we're definitely going to be doing that. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to start it today, so you'll see kind of roughly how I might approach that problem. Okay, so the place to start is the application. Let's see. So we've got the main game loop in here, which is what I'm looking for, which is here. So at the moment we have, while we're running, we do a frame stats reset for the debugger, then we poll our input, we update our elapsed, and we draw. Elapsed is just elapsed time, so the amount of time that's passed since the last frame. At the moment that's a variable elapsed time. I may change that to be a fixed time. I haven't decided yet. Okay, so I think it's probably more likely to be a fixed time. We'll see how we get on with that. Okay, so we've got an update command and a draw command, and straight away this is frustrating. I'm not really liking this at all. Our update command mostly just does the update of the game state and the GUI and the music. Okay, so we can probably drill down in here to think a bit more about how this might work. But then we have a draw command, which is entirely separate. And the problem with that is that you're walking through all of your entities to update them, and then you're walking through them all to draw them. And that basically means loading them all into the cache once to update them, and then loading a certain subset of them back into the cache to draw them. And I just don't really want to do that. I'd much prefer starting with updating a small section of the game world, the one that I'm around, and then kind of going from there. So the plan is to see what's going on inside these game states and actually create an update and draw call. But I'll probably combine those as a separate step. For the moment, I'm just interested in how this game state update is done. So we have space location game state. That's the main update call that gets called from here. So if we find update in here we go. So here we update the state of the world, update the radio messages list, and all of this stuff is mostly around just figuring out whether the ship's been destroyed, whether we have a planet GUI, anything like that. So I'm not so interested in most of that stuff. I'm more interested in this state update and how that works. So let's jump into the state. This is kind of the place that contains the entire game. So we have a solar system which contains all the planets. That manages the economy. Then we have all of the different kind of bits of ships components. We have the AI. We have a date of the game. We have which player we're talking about, the history, which also contains all of the main entities, and then we have a life stage library. So the solar system is the thing that contains all of the entities at the moment, and this is really going to have to change a lot. So as you can see, we're storing a whole bunch of different entities here, different lookup maps. It's all very complicated, and it really doesn't need to be as complicated as this. So what I'm thinking of doing is starting probably with the space location game state and started commenting out quite a lot of this stuff. So let's find the update. See, I'm going to comment out that. I'm going to replace all of that. I'm happy with that. But what happens if I just don't update the state? That would be an interesting step to do. Let's see what would happen. So if I don't update the state, we don't have a system AI update and we don't tick the date. So that wouldn't be the end of the world, if I'm honest. We only update the system and the AI. So I'm just trying to find the entry point for putting in some of this new code. Basically what happens with the solar system, when that updates, what that does is, where are we? It goes through every single location in the world and every inner location in the world and calls update, which is insanely slow, and we just can't do that. That's just not possible, and it's also very slow because it's a VAP lookup. So and then in there's multiple referencing of VAP lookups, and it's just very, very slow. So I think what I'm going to do to start this is go right back through here, back to the space location game state, which is kind of like the main game loop, which is inside the menus. And we're not going to do any of this. In fact, we're not going to have a state to start with. We're going to allow it to be created, but we're not actually going to use it at the moment. And we're going to think about how the entities are going to work. So the important thing here is, oh, hello, Opblaz Popchi. I don't quite know how you'd say that. But you're very welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us. I'm in the process of sorting out the entities. That's what I'm trying to do at the moment. What I want to do is create a new world, but I want to write the usage code first. I want to write the code that actually uses this thing so that I know how it should be written, and go from there. So, okay. Okay, so moving on to the state. So if we go for basically what we want to do is update all of the entities in turn. So we want to be able to go through a list of entities. So in order to do that, I need to create some sort of entity struct. Let's just use a struct for the moment. Call it an entity. And then I want to basically be able to loop through those things. So really what I want to do is be able to set it up so that this entity has some kind of position function that I can update, and also it needs to be able to be moved around. It needs some kind of acceleration and velocity, which we can put in a minute. But more than that, I really need to figure out how to store this stuff. That's the main thing. So before I get to this, I need some way of storing kind of where I'm up to. So let's figure that out. Yeah, let's figure out that at the moment. Let's just go back to the solar system, which is the thing that's mainly containing these things. If I keep state going, and keep that one going, go back to the solar system update command. Right. Okay, so we've got a solar system here. We've got, let's see, we have the update command here. The way that this is created is actually in the state code, so let's have a look at that. I'm familiarizing myself with this code again. It's been a while since I touched it. So what happens is that we load the static data that gets things into, so for example, that gets in the planets and things like that. So this is probably a good place to start. So let's just have a look at Sol YAML. That contains all of the kind of locations of the game. This is all fully moddable. Yeah, we can figure that out. Oh, the connection drops. Ugh, how frustrating. I'm sorry about that. Let's see whether or not that's true. Unfortunately, the connection out here isn't always brilliant. We can have a few problems with it, which is kind of annoying. It appears to be online at the moment. If it's offline, please let me know if it goes offline. That would be great. Yeah, sorry about the connection. I need to figure out how to improve the way that this internet connection works in general, but I haven't figured that out yet. Yeah, I'll do that some other time. Okay, yeah, we just put a note on the chat about that. I don't really want to play the video. Thanks very much, Twitch. Okay, I'm just making a note on the chat here. Okay, cool. So, right, so moving on. So this is how we actually load all of this stuff. And at the moment, we create our system from a particular path. So here's where it loads, and this is the static map loader that actually does the loading. So what does this actually do? So this is a good place to start because we're actually loading the game in here. So we create a new file, we grab it. Yeah, that's not a very good way of creating files because you can have problems in Windows if you create files like that. I need to work on that. So let's just put a little to-do in there. Remove. I think I'm using BoostIFStream elsewhere, which I don't really like doing, but it does get around problems in Windows. Stupid connection. That's interesting that the connection keeps dropping. Twitch seems to keep saying that it's working fine, which is annoying. So let me just pause that again. Actually, I'll just run that through. So Twitch keeps saying the connection is excellent. So that's a bit tricky. Not quite sure what to do about that. I'm kind of running at 30 frames a second at the moment. I may just drop it down to 20 and see if that improves. I am streaming at 720p, so that could cause problems. Sorry if that's the case. It's difficult to know how much to spend screwing around with the connection and how much to actually spend coding. I'd much prefer to start coding, but there we go. Let's just finish that comment on Windows. Right. Okay. So PatchFX, it might actually be your connection rather than mine. I'm not sure. If anyone else knows, if anyone else can chime in and tell me whether it's dropping, that's helpful to know. Okay, so save that a minute. Okay, so what are we doing? We're looking for some usage code. What I want to do is I want to create a world where the way that the entities work is continually or completely continuous. What I really need is a sketchpad so that I can sketch this. Let me see if I can find a reasonably decent thing to do this. There's a really good sketching paint program, online sketch tool. If anyone knows what it is, I'd be very happy to let's just take all that stuff out of the way. I'd be very happy to use that, but I'm not quite sure what it is. So let's see if I can find one quickly. Sketch.io, I think, is a good one. Let's go with that one. Okay. Okay, so let's go with this, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so let's just start with various pencil. Fine, that'll do. Okay, so what we've got at the moment, let's just clear that to white. Start with, or maybe dark grey, so it looks a bit like a blackboard. That works for me. Okay, so what I've got at the moment is I have locations. So I have locations, and those are basically in a big area. And inside here I have all of my different entities, and in order to get from one location to another, what happens is that an entity is taken from these big locations, so these are both locations, and it's kind of picked up and it's put into this location, and you have more entities here. Okay, and what happens is when you draw it, you go through by drawing this one, and then we draw this one over here. So it kind of works, it kind of doesn't work that well. Basically we update all of these locations, and there may be loads of them in the game, but we only draw the one that the player's in. But potentially the player could be in a tiny section of these, and this could be absolutely huge. This could be sort of, you know, multiple screens worth, and maybe we are only looking at this amount of it. So we might have thousands of entities that we don't want to update. So that's no good. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe instead of doing this, and let's see if I can move over a little bit. No, I can't make this any bigger, so I'm just going to select it and clear it. Unfortunately, clearing it doesn't do what I wanted it to do. Okay, that's fine. Instead of doing that, what I'm going to do instead is have a big square, or conceptually, I'm going to have a big square. And I really want to thank Casey Muratori from Handmade Hero for the ideas surrounding how to do this. It's really going to work. Oops, it's really going to work for my game. So what I want to do is have a big square, which basically contains the whole of the addressable memory of this game. So we're going to start with 0, 0 down here, and we're going to go to basically as big as an unsigned 4-bit or 4-byte, I should say, integer. So that's 4.2 billion in each direction. So that's going to be 4.2 billion that way, 4.2 billion that way. So I worked out that if I do this, then in theory, what I should be able to do is basically have one chunk of space for each of these coordinates. So we've got basically the ability to have 4.2 billion times 4.2 billion, which must be like 16 to the 24 or something, different chunks of space. So say we have in here, say we have 500 meter chunks. So one coordinate in here will be actually around about 500 meters worth of space. So that, oops, not that. So each of these is about 500 meters by 500 meters. Now I worked out the other day that if I have a 500 meters by 500 meters, if I was to put the sun right in the middle, planets, that's not a very good orbit, but all of the different planets orbiting, then in theory I should be able to have Pluto somewhere around here. So we'll drop the font size slightly. Pluto will end up being somewhere around there. Oops, did not want to do that. Do that there. Okay, which means that in theory, in this 4.2 billion pounds of addressable space, even if I used 500 meter chunks, I will be able to represent almost 4 times the whole of the solar system in that space, assuming that the sun is at the centre, which is great. It means that I don't have to worry about Oh, I see. Is there still a problem with the microphone? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I will try and speak closer to the microphone. It's a new mic. I'm still figuring it out. I need to get a new stand for it so it's closer to me. Hopefully that will help. I'm sorry if the connection's not very good. I'm still working on it. So let's have a look and see. It's still problematic. Yeah. It's very hard to get the sound higher. I've got everything maxed out. It's just a question of speaking close to the microphone, I think, which is just annoying. But there we go. There's not much else I can do about that and still type. That would be quite tricky. But I can do my best. If I move this over, maybe. Let's try that. Okay. Right. So hopefully the connection is better. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to be able to get this done, but I'm going to try our best to do this. Let's see if I can do a sample CO1U. I don't mind if this is a little bit of a test for the connection. It's my first weekly stream. I'm happy to kind of refine and iterate to see whether or not I can make it work well. Sorry for all of the connection drops and the problems with the connection. It can be problems with the audio as well. I'm just trying to work out whether or not we can make this. Let's see. We're just working on it now. It is a quiet microphone, unfortunately. So hopefully it'll start working better. I just need to make sure that I'm still transmitting correctly. I'm transmitting 20 frames a second, so hopefully that's going to work okay. Twitch appears to be accepting that bit rate. It is 720p, so maybe I need to think about dropping that slightly. So yeah, we'll work it out. Anyway, so instead of doing what I was doing before, where I have different locations containing a bunch of entities, what I want to do is I want to have a massive address space like the one I'm looking at, and I want to have basically the ability to reference any 500 meter grid on this massive address space. And basically I want that 500 meter grid to be, I want 4.2 billion worth of 500 meter grids. So that's 2.1 billion by 2.1 billion kilometers, which is big enough, by the way, to contain the entire solar system at least twice. So that's what I'm working for as my addressable system. Now, there is no way that I can store and hold all of that as a thing. Even to hold 4-byte integer at that level would be impossible. Even to hold 1 byte would be 2.1. I don't know how to work it out. 4.2 gigabytes times 4.2 gigabytes. So it's basically 4.2 billion billion machines worth of 4.2 gigabytes. There probably isn't enough memory in the entire world to contain just one integer at this kind of addressable memory. So what I want to do is I want to get it so that these are set in chunks, so that each of these 500 meter grids may or may not exist. And in practice, we probably won't have more than a few thousand of them being active at any one time. And what we'll do is we will store them and store the entities that are in them sparsely. So that's pretty much how it's going to work. That's what I want to do. Then basically when somebody is in a particular chunk, then that grid will exist. When they're not in that chunk, then the grid won't exist. The grid reference will go away. We won't persist them because if you're flying through the world, you don't want to have those persisted. But they're small enough that I can store the offset that the player is into that chunk in a 32-bit 4-byte float. That's what I want to do, which means that the idea is that we, with floating point precision, you don't really want to use doubles because that's what I was using before, because they're twice as slow as floats. they take up more space, that kind of thing. But if I'm able to use 4-byte floats, what I can do is I can store precision at the kind of 500 meter level without much trouble, because these things are reasonably big. We're talking about spaceships and that kind of thing. So if I can store enough precision in a 4-byte float, then I'm able to basically store an X and Y as a SIMD vector, something like that. So it's an 8-byte vector or whatever later on, so that I'm able to really optimize for that. Because they're much quicker and better. So basically, I want to be able to store everything in the world as a coordinate, any coordinate in the world, as which 500 meter square the player is in, or whatever the entity is in, and also what the 32-bit offset in each direction is for that position in that square. What that means is that I only need basically 16 bytes to store anywhere in the entire solar system. That's the idea. So that's what I want to do. I want to find some code where I actually start loading in the data. So I've got the locations, I've got Earth orbit, I've got gates, I've got where the Earth is in the world, that kind of thing. So this is where this the kind of entity code is first used, when we actually start loading in static data, loading in the Earth data and the Moon data and all of the other planets in here. So basically, what I want to do is I want to start thinking about this in terms of how, where in that particular world space these things are, and basically how to load them in the right places. So I'm going to work on doing that now. So we have a set of locations here. These are currently in pixels. That's not ideal. They're in kind of it's not really what we want to do. We're going to be working on improving that in a bit. For now, we're just going to start looking at this map loading routine here, and I'm going to try and work out whether or not or how I can start using a new entity system through loading in these static locations. So for the moment, we've got that's enough talking. Let's get to some coding. So we've got doc locations here. We've got a particular LAML key, which is this locations key here, and then we grab the key, and then we grab the name of the particular location that we're looking at. So in practice, actually, we don't want to do this at all. What we're much more interested in is the planets that we've got and the particular entities. So maybe I should just start a new file type here where I talk about a particular entity, and then I say where it is. So let's take, for example, the Earth. Let's grab that, pop it down here, and then I want to move it back to there. That's right. So I'll keep all of that stuff because that's fine. But this X and Y needs to change. So maybe what we need to do is have a position, okay, and then we need to talk about where on that big grid this thing is. Now I have no idea really how to refer to that yet, so I need to think about that. But we basically got, say, each of these things that we've got here on the grid, we could call these a tile. So I could call it a tile X and a tile Y, and then we could talk about an offset X and an offset Y. Okay, so I need to decide where to put these things. It's likely that I'm going to need to kind of iterate on how that works. I think that the best thing to do at the moment would be to just choose something that's reasonably approachable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a number which is easy to read and work with rather than necessarily the correct one. So I'm going to go with tile 1000 to tile Y 1000, just so we can start. And within that tile, I'm going to say that the offset of this thing is, if we're talking about between 0 and 1, for the thing, I'm just going to say that the offset is basically 0. Let's go for 0.5, 0.5. So it's right in the middle of the tile. Okay, so that's now my position. And like I said, it's difficult to read this at the moment. This isn't. It depends on how big these tiles are, but that's a starting point certainly. So if I was to read this thing in, how would I go about doing that? Well, we've got the code here that starts it. We've got, instead of reading locations, we want to read entities. We load the key, which is in this case is no longer a location. This is now an entity node, and we've got the name of it, which we're putting into that string there. and then we're creating a new space location. So I don't want to do any of this anymore. What I want to do is basically say that I've got a new entity. I want to say, for example, entity. I'm not sure about a component system yet. I'm going to kind of refactor to an entity component system. That's the idea. But I'm going to have only one type of object for each entity. So let's say I want an entity. I don't have this yet, but I've got a. This is going to be an entity, just like this. We'll start off with it being 0. Okay, and then I want to say basically the entity name. Do I want to store the names in here? Let's think about this. I probably do. Let's start with just storing them in there. So let's just grab it. It's just a bit of data. I don't really care about the structure yet. Then we don't care about the key. We don't care about the bodies or the gates in it. What we do care about is the position. So basically I want to say position here, and I want to grab the tile X. I'll put that in tile X and tile Y. And let's just create these as floats. Now before I was using float. Now I'm again of the opinion that I should really be using a different type, which is real32, tile X and tile Y, so that I'm very clear as to how big it is, because that's important, how big these things are. And the other thing I want to do is I want to have a UN32, which is actually that one is the UN32, tile X and tile Y, and this is the real32, which is the offset X and the offset Y. Okay, and then when I've done that, I should be just offset. I'm constantly doing that. And of course, that also should be, that one should be there, that one should be there. Okay. Offset Y. Let's have a look. Okay, so now what we've got is we've got the position of the entity, so we've got that all working well. So now we've started off with that. Let's just set these to 0 to start with. Oops. Sorry if you're still getting dropouts. I will do a few test streams to see if I can improve it. Right. So we've got connect gates. Yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore because I think that the way that's going to work is different. Load is true, return true. We'll still do that. Okay, so now what we've got is it's clear that we need some sort of entity structure, which I'm just going to define in a brand new entity class at the moment. Let's see if I can do that. So source entity. Oh yeah, I've already got entity. Well, there's no time like the present to basically just kill that completely. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do git remove source entity. Oops, I actually need to load it first. Right, this one, this nasty old piece of code here, which was doing our entity before, gone, completely gone. Corresponding CPP code, also gone. Gone. Okay, so now if I was to start with a new entity file, I can think about actually how I want this to work. Oops, there we go. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to need as well is I'm going to also need a source types header file, which also includes, let's just do this, if endfcp types.h. Actually a while since I've actually had a chance to work on this game. It's quite satisfying. Okay, so the things I wanted to do were type def, float, real32, reals, type def, unsigned int, uint32, and then type def over here, int32, 32, and now I'm absolutely sure what those types are. Okay, and then I just want to, that's really part of the platform code, because these might actually change later on. So I think I've got platform code here anyway. So really, these probably just want to belong in here. And this is kind of what this is. So I'm going to get rid of this file actually completely because I don't really want it. Okay. So once we've done that, we've now got these types. We've now got these reals here, which is good. So now we're going to look at actually building an entity, weren't we, which I've just started. So move to that entity file here. Right, so now we don't have anything yet. If endf cp entity.h, define it. Okay. Right, so what we need is a class. Struct entity, and basically in order to be able to write this code we're going to need to be able to say this entity struct has a name, so we're going to just use our char, probably char. Char is always defined to be a char, so that's fine. So we're going to have a name, which we're going to say that the maximum name is 1 to 8 to start with, and then we're going to do a position. So if we have a struct position in the game, which is going to have a real 32 offset x, real 32 offset y, and then we're going to have a un32 tile x, un32 tile y. Okay, so we've now got our position. So now we should just be able to say position. Okay, and that should cover everything that I need for this thing here, which is a good starting point. Basically, what I need to now work out is how do I get back to the simplest possible thing where I can start playing around with these ideas before going crazy, or so that I don't end up with a non-working game. Because that would not be good. So that's certainly a starting point, and that's informed that I need position and that kind of thing. We've also got x, y, and size here. So we should be able to just copy a bunch of this stuff in here in as well. This is no longer a location node, this is just a node. I don't think I've got a node anywhere else, no, or an entity node. And then actually I can do the same here actually. These are all entity nodes, and then take all of this, put that in there. We've already got the name happening. The description is a bit more complicated. I don't really want to store the description here because then I'd have to do description. Let's see, this is not something I really want to think about now. How am I going to store that description, because it could be quite long. I do need to think about it. I don't want to put it in the entity because then it just makes these things very long and we don't need it that often, and we only really need it when we're displaying this thing. So I think what I probably will do is suffer a pointer lookup at this point. That's probably the right thing to do, and then just say entity description. Okay, and then we could have potentially plenty of those entity descriptions which we can push onto the stack. Yeah, let's do that. So this description is just going to go into entity description, and then that one is a pointer, and this one is going to be description. Description is the wrong word here. It's probably because it contains a description. Entity text is better. Okay, and we call that one text. Okay, so now we have an entity text description. Now, in order to make that work, we're going to need the same with the name. some way of doing this code. We're going to need to initialize the entity. Text. For the moment, I don't want to allocate memory. That's not what I'm interested in doing. Basically, what I'm looking at doing here, there's so much to do, so many cool things to write. We're going to need some sort of memory pool to store these entities. So that's kind of probably the next thing that I want to think about. I want to think about how to do the platform code, but I'm going to have to leave that to another coding session because that's probably not going to help me to figure out. So what I need to do here is to say to do using a memory pool, and ultimately I'm going to need to pass in some kind of memory pool that I can actually initialize these things onto anyway. So that I don't have to worry about serialization anymore. That will be a real joy, and I'll be able to delete maybe 20% of the code once I've done that, so that'll be great. It's amazing how much you learn. I ummed and ahed about just getting the game shipped. That was originally what I was planning on doing, but I actually thought in the end I just need to get this done, otherwise it's just going to be ridiculous. Let's see if that goes away. Oh, why not do it? Tilde float real 32. Maybe I do want that types. I think I do want that types file. Don't want to import all of that platform stuff. There's the types. Where's that entity then? Types. Yeah, I am denied about whether or not to continue as I was doing with just trying to get this thing finished. Oops, that's the wrong thing to type. But actually, so much of this code isn't going to really work well when it's in production and when I'm trying to polish it and trying to make it fast, that I just figured I'm going to have to bite the bullet and then replace a bunch of the stuff. Because at the moment it's a struggle to actually even work on it, if I'm honest. And just make a note. Connection should be better now. If it isn't, then let me know. Yeah, so I'm struggling to work on some of the stuff, and it's just getting slower and slower, and there's still more that I want to do in terms of processing. So I figured actually I'm going to have to bite the bullet and rewrite and make some of this stuff production ready, because it isn't at the moment. Okay, so we're going to figure out that next time. I'm not going to worry about that now. I'm going to do that after the stream. We've got a couple of things here that doesn't need to happen. We've got a size, which needs to go in here as well. So the size is currently in meters. That's the wrong thing. So let's just make this. Size is currently in pixels. In meters, not pixels. And we've got two. The interesting thing is we kind of have two scaling things going on now. So we have the size of the chunk, which is in ship space, and then we also have the size of planets, which is in a very different scaling level. Because if you've seen any of the screenshots of the game, if I just switch to the way that the game works, let's have a look at, probably the easiest thing to do is go to the website. You'll see that the way that the game works is that you have, for example here, you have ships flying around and you have a planet in the background. But obviously the planet is at a very different level of scale to the ships, because the ships would be tiny or the planet would be huge. So they're actually in the background. So that's something that I need to think about in terms of the scaling levels. So we've got, make a note about that, two different scaling levels between planet and ships. But I can worry about that later. It would be quite nice to be able to specify the real diameter of the Earth and have that just work, rather than having to kind of translate all the time into pixels, which is what I was doing before. Okay, so we've now managed to write something. It's a little bit, it's not brilliant, but it's a start. This can be now entity, position, tilex, same there, same there, same there. Okay, so now we don't need any of that. Great. So it's a little bit ugly. We're kind of just trying to figure out the basics to start with. The key, now that's interesting. That's how other entities are referred to So that's maybe something that we need to have. It's more likely that we will store a hash of that key, but I'm not quite sure what to do about that yet. So I'm going to leave that. So I'm also going to say we need to store the key. And by key I mean the thing inside the Sol YAML file here, this thing. And I think we do because various other things point to it. Though I'm not sure anything actually points to the earth. It's more that jump gates might need to point to each other. So if we go back to a location, we find a gate. This gate here points to, let's see, this one here points to a different place. So we are going to need that, but we may only need that inside the generation code, inside the loading code. It may not be something that we actually need to store outside of that. If that's the case, then we don't need to worry about it. This is just loading code. Okay, so this isn't going to work at all. We are going to end up in trouble because the way that this works is that it currently uses a structure that doesn't actually exist yet, which isn't going to work. So we need to figure out how to actually get those memory pools working. That's not something I'm going to do on the stream. That's a really good starting point though for trying to figure out how the entity stuff works and whether or not it's any better. I'm pleased with that as a starting point. It's not perfect, and there's an awful lot to do, but it is a starting point. And it's really good to actually go through just a piece of code that I might actually use to start with, rather than a piece of code that just trying to work out kind of naturally what I need. So if I'd done that, I probably wouldn't have even thought about the entity text, which already exists, and I may not have thought about the position as well as I did there. So I'm quite pleased with the way that that's kind of worked itself out. I'm also a little bit worried about this being the same name file as the old one. I'd prefer to remove the file entirely, and I think I will do that. So if I do git add that, and then do git move, I'm thinking about calling this something else. I don't really like new entity, but that's kind of what it is. Let's go with that for the moment. It's not brilliant, but it'll do. Okay, so let's just update that so it doesn't get in a mess with the old one. Okay, I think that's the right thing to do. We'll kind of go from there. Okay, so I probably just got time to have a look at the way that the rest of the state is loaded and figure out where I want to start from. So the load static data from, where is that actually called? Let's see if we can find that. This is the piece of code that calls the thing that we were doing. Right, so this is where we load a new state, and we load the static data from there. So when we create a new state, let's see what happens here. Okay, we fill in, that's all history stuff. We have a state create, so this is the new state and loading the static data. This is the code that sits behind the main menu, this file here. So when we hit the new game button, new game, start game, then all we do is create the various games. Oh yeah, the new state is in there, create history. So let's see, where's new state come from? Right, in the load game, yeah, that's fine. I'm not worried about load game at the moment. New state, where did that come from? Right, so in here, when we start the thing, originally we create a new state. So when we create new history, create history, where's the history creation done? I'm not sure that's done from here. Let's see. Show main menu, show update menu. This is a menu controller, so it's not necessarily going to have everything in it. Right, show help, show load, quit and update, new game, new state. Right, so we have a new state, show world generation. So this is the world gen controller and then comes up. The world gen controller is the thing, if I've got it up running here, is the thing where when you click new history, this is the thing that then comes up. It's all about how to actually populate the cities. And you know, all of this stuff, if I was to compile it now, would be broken. See, it's even broken already. That's probably because I removed a bunch of stuff. So yeah, I'm not going to start. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about do I mean that now. It will be So let's just move that out of the way. Is the mic muted or really, really low? The mic is really low. It's really annoying that it's low. I'm sorry about that. It's something I need to figure out off stream, and I will do that. I was screwing around with it before stream. It seemed okay, but it's frustrating that it's actually come out so low when we take it to Twitch. I thought that I'd fixed it in the off stream, but clearly I haven't, and I'm going to need to spend some time figuring out why that is, and I'll do that for the next stream. When I answer the Q&A, if there are any questions, I will actually move right close to the mic like this, so you'll be able to hear me. But I can't code like that because it would be a nightmare, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, so this is how the world generation starts. We have a new state that creates the new thing and then loads the static data. Once that's done, where does the player get loaded? So this loads the solar system, it loads the economy, it loads the blueprints, and that's it. It creates a new history. So where is the player moved out of how this works? Is that done in the world generation? World generation controller. This is my own code, but I just need to figure out how it works. So we have a start game button here. Okay, so create player based on this player. That's what happens, and then we generate a solar system. Fine. Okay, so we create the player where we give the player 300 credits to start with in a ship. And we set them going, and we put them in a particular place. That's fine, but it's not what we want to do from now on. So ideally, what I want to do is I want to get to the point where we have a very basic world like this one I've talked about here. Where are we? This one here, where we have all of the different. We have a huge addressable world with all of the different. This is the sun. And then we have other different planets here, and then the idea is to be able to have these tiny little grids that we can move around on. Unfortunately, at the moment we've got too much other stuff in the game. We're going to need to comment out a heck of a lot of stuff in order to get to that point, and I'm just kind of trying to find out where the kind of starting point is for actually kind of this big refactor. It would be great if the game has some of these better elements in it, but there's quite a lot of unpicking to do of old code before I can get to that point. So that's kind of what I'm working on doing at the moment. So yeah, I've pretty much finished for the day. I think that's a starting point. I'm kind of happy that I've got to that point. Within the hour. So it's a good starting point for kind of the future. And next week when I get online, hopefully I will have that kind of up and running. So next time around, I should be working on getting some of the bigger systems back into the game, and you can see kind of how that fits together, and I'll try and explain it. So what I think I'll do is move on to Q&A. If you have any kind of questions about the approach, about the game, or anything that you like at all, really, this is the time to ask them. So I'm going to kind of hang around watching the stream for a little while and answer anything that comes up. So yeah, I'm aware that we've had a few technical problems, so if you didn't catch all of that, then please do ask away. I'm very happy to talk through the game or anything like that. So yeah. Of course, there's always a 30-second lag period before you actually see the questions, or it could be there are no questions, which is also fine. I figured that I wanted to actually do Q&A at the end rather than in the middle of the stream. The reason that works, I think, a little bit better is just because at the end of the stream, it gives us everybody an opportunity to kind of to ask them all together, and also it means that my flow isn't interrupted when I'm trying to figure out a tricky problem or something like that, or it's kind of down to those kinds of issues really, and it just means that if you had a question and then I answer it straight afterwards, you don't feel like you've been ignored. One question that I think came up earlier, which I haven't seen, it has been answered yet. What do I do when I've got a big game idea? How do I start coding a big game? I think that the answer, as I think PatchFX said on the stream, is to start small. It's to try something small first, something with a reduced scope to get confidence up into actually how to build games. I wouldn't necessarily start with a huge game. Most people who start with huge games fail. I can't believe I'm still going really. I started with a reasonably big idea for a game. It's still going, and it's still working, and I'm 3 years in and I'm still enjoying it. But it is a hard slog. So especially if you don't have a programming background or anything like that, the best thing to do is just to start. I think someone mentioned the 1 game a month, 1 GAM process, and I would really recommend that as a great process. So yeah, go through that process and enjoy building games. And there's also something else called Ludum Dare, which is a kind of a hack weekend where you design and build a game as quickly as you possibly can within a weekend. It's lots of fun. I really recommend you to do that and just go out and find people nearby you who are building games and kind of hang out with them and ask them questions and figure out how to kind of approach your idea. But yeah, build something small first and learn as much as you can about the process of making them, and then that'll make you a much better developer or designer, and then you'll be able to go from there. Great. Well, if there aren't any other questions, then I'm happy to sign off there. Thanks very much for watching. So there isn't currently a way to play this game, and if you didn't sign into the early kind of beta, that's all now closed. Having said that, the game will be available on Kickstarter later in the year. So if you're interested in let's see if I can load it up so you can have a look at it. If you're interested, it may have died horribly. Yes, probably. That's probably because of the. Let's see if I can actually start it up. If you're interested in it, the best thing to do is to follow it on Twitter or on Twitch or on Facebook or any of those things. You should be able to find it. Let's just save that. Try running it again. So let's see if this works. Yay. Okay, so this is the game. Like I said, it's not possible currently to play it outside of the closed beta testing community that we've got running at the moment, but it will be possible to do that in the summer. I'm looking to, once I finish this refactor, I'm looking to polish it up and get it out reasonably soon now, so it's not going to take forever now to build and to get it out. I want to get this game done this year. There's a lot of potential in it. It's a lot of fun to play. I think there's a lot of ways it could be improved, but you know, it's a really good game. It's lots of fun, and yeah, keep following me. The Twitch stream is running. Oh, one question. Go on then. If you have a question, you've got 1 second to answer it. That's fine. So yeah, go for it quickly if you've got time to get that in. But yeah, this is the game. Can I explain a little bit about using the benefits of a component entity approach? So the idea, what PatchFX means is the idea of having an entity with components is basically where you don't store your whole entity together. In the way that you do it is you break up particular aspects of that entity into individual pieces. So instead of having a ship entity, you might have an entity that just handles positioning, or you might have an entity that just handles animation or movement or something like that. The benefits of a component entity approach is that you can sort your various different bits of data for fast processing. So you can do all of the animations all in one go, or all of the movement updates, or all of the kind of attack updates, or whatever it is. And it's also conceptually more potentially clearer and easier to understand. The drawbacks of the approach is that it's harder to reason about, and potentially you have problems with referencing between different entity types. You end up needing to build a message pump in order to be able to manage them. But in general, it's a reasonable way of approaching kind of different entities talking to each other. I'm not sure we're going to use a component entity approach on this game. It's possible. It depends on how the code goes, really. It depends on who needs to use what. But we will see whether or not that's an appropriate move. It's interesting, if you look at this code now, you can see, probably see on the stream, that it has got rather slow with some of the latest features I've added. In terms of the frame rate, isn't massively fast, and the reason that I want to get it faster, or want to approach this kind of way of building it using different entities, is to actually make the frame rate super solid. That's really what I'm going for. You know, there's a lot of fun in the game, but it's not a super solid frame rate yet, and that's kind of the next step, to try and see if I can build systems that enable that. Great, so thanks very much for coming. The next stream will be same time next week, which is Monday at 2 o'clock, and I'll be doing an hour of development and an hour of Q&A, and hopefully I've got a good deal further than the point I've got to at the moment with the entities, and hopefully I'll be able to show you the fruits of my labour over the last week. Great, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.